Arthur Staple has been following this story for a very long time. Arthur Staple, it is a thrill to have finally achieved an answer to this question that has been on our minds for so long. What's your immediate reaction to the decision made by Tavares, and what's next for the Islanders?
You know, it's covering this team for as long as I have. You certainly get to know a lot of the fans, and it's a pretty passionate fan base. They've been beaten around a lot over the last couple of decades with lack of success and all the arena issues they've had. So I definitely feel for them. You know, this is watching the biggest star that they've had in this organization in a long, long time walk away, and talk about how he wanted to go to his childhood home and what a dream it's been. It's probably a hard day for a lot of Islanders fans. It's a hard day for the Islanders organization. They've done a lot to cater to John Tavares over the last couple of years and over his decade there. And, the way that it went this week, I'm sure it didn't hamstring Lou Lamoriello from doing what he wanted to do today, but it certainly didn't help very much. So it's a tough day all around, I think, in Islanders country.
All right, Arthur, what are the next steps? We know they have a lot of cap room. I wouldn't suggest they need to go and just blow their doors off on anybody that comes around. But, what would make sense for the Islanders at this point to try to add during this free agent period, guys that are still out there that make sense for you?
I mean, it was slim pickings, like you said, EJ,
yeah.
And it's even slimmer now. So, I think trades are really the way to go for Lou Lamoriello, and he's a pretty shrewd trade partner. And there are some guys, there really haven't been any trades. I mean, there's still a lot of big names that have been bandied about that haven't gone anywhere, whether it's Ryan O'Reilly, who's a guy who probably the best fit as a number 2 center out there would be behind Matthew Barzal. Obviously, the cost would be high. There's Erik Karlsson, if you want to make a big splash. And in net, they haven't found any solutions there, and that's obviously the biggest piece that they need right now is to find a goaltender. So they do have some assets. They picked up a bunch at the top of the draft last week in Dallas with a lot of good young prospects. So they have some other guys maybe that have become expendable. So I think Lou is really probably looking in that front right now, just because none of these free agents are really going to be guys that you can plug in and say, good, now we've got someone in place of John Tavares, because you're not replacing him that way.
Arthur, you mentioned the goaltending position. I would have to think if you're in Lou's shoes, that becomes the critical question. Carter Hutton has come off the board. I'm with you. It probably comes by way of a trade somewhere. Do you get a sense from working in and around this organization, is there something in the works? Is this group targeting anybody specifically?
Well, the way Lou operates, you're not going to find out until it's done. So, I think you just kind of look logically. There's some guys who are entering the final years of their contracts, whether it's a guy like Jimmy Howard in Detroit. If you're reaching for the moon, maybe they try to pry Pekka Rinne out of Nashville, see if that's going to be a possibility. I know that's certainly a long shot and would cost a lot. Sergei Bobrovsky, similar situation. But I think the priority for Lou is definitely to find a good goaltender. And I think in all of this, John Tavares would never say it publicly, but I'm sure privately he felt he'd never really played in front of an elite goaltender in his time with the Islanders, a guy who you could always rely upon. And so I think Lou certainly understands, even without that note from John Tavares, that this team needs a more permanent solution in net, and I'm sure he's looking for one right now.
Because you followed this story so closely, you're uniquely qualified to answer this question. The factors that led to Tavares making this decision in the fashion that he made it, what would you say is the biggest reason why this happened?
I'd have to say the disappointment from the last couple of years, on-ice product, seeing a lot of his good friends go, that transitional offseason in 2016 when they'd finally won a playoff round. They seemed like they were on the cusp of being a regular participant in the postseason. And then Kyle Opozo walks away on July 1. Franz Nielsen walks away on July 1. Those are two guys that are going to be front and center at John's wedding next month. Matt Martin also walked away. A big part of that core, and it's not to say that those guys would have been the solution, because the deals they got haven't really helped the new teams that they're on. But I think just the chemistry of a team that had built up from nothing was really broken apart that day, and they really were never able to put it back together. And I think that one stayed with John Tavares. And then the lack of moves to really offset what the slide that began at the beginning of that 16-17 season, those were the things I think that were the biggest impact on him.
Tremendous context, as always. Arthur Staple, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.